We had the best time doing the initial breakdown of the body language and behavior in this video, and we decided we'd revisit some of our favorite moments from it.
Tell me in your words what happened.
Larry was home. He was watching Tiger Woods and then was going to take a nap and watch the Super Bowl later on that evening. I checked on him to see if he needed anything. He said that we would order a pizza later, and I went back out to the gym. The last thing that my husband said to me was, "I love you." I had the music blaring and was working out. I walked into my house at approximately 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I found my husband in a pool of blood. I've never seen so much blood in my life. And I could see from where I was standing that my house had been ransacked. I didn't know if Larry had fallen down the stairs, if Larry had been shot, if Larry had been stabbed. I had no idea what had happened. But I frantically tried to take his pulse and then ran outside to call 911. I thought my husband was still alive because his eyes were open. And I told him to hold on. My world has not been the same since. And nothing has made much sense for me since that time.
But the police seem pretty certain that you were the killer, that you cold-bloodedly took a gun and pumped 5 bullets into your husband until he was dead. That's what they believe.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
We definitely see a lot here. One thing we're going to start seeing a lot of that you're seeing in this video is her nodding for the other person to nod. She's wanting Piers to start nodding. She's asking for approval, and he's not doing it. And you'll notice that in these other videos. But she's only nodding during the times when she's offering up a piece of evidence that makes her innocent. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And she also has an upward tone when she's saying something and asking you to agree with it at the times when she's presenting that evidence.
I found my husband in a pool of blood, and I could see from where I was standing that my house had been ransacked. I thought my husband was still alive.
And more than 50% of the time, she'll also include an eyebrow flash with that nod to make sure that you follow along with that behavior. When Piers is offering up this accusation that police are saying that you shot this person in cold blood, walking through that, we see emotional accessing down here with the eyes, followed by a distance. There's a stare, there's a slight head shake, and it's followed by a tiny swallow right at the end of this clip. In my line of work, in 20 years of doing this stuff, I see a lot of this, and this is called dissociation. So I think we're going to start seeing a pattern here of a person, the behaviors of a person who has experienced a lot of dissociation, and especially with things that she's been through in her past, and things she's done in her past. Dissociation may be par for the course for her childhood and probably much of her adult life. And there's two types of dissociation. I'll just cover really quick. There's depersonalization and there's derealization. Depersonalization means that this isn't me doing this. These hands were not mine that did this. And there's derealization, which means the world isn't real. This situation is fake. I don't feel like I'm in a real situation. The derealization tends to lead to antisocial behavior, which this woman is social. She's able to do the facial expressions. She makes good conversation. I say that, with all the slack I can give it. The depersonalization part of it, to where the person is detached from self, is more likely to lead into higher social development. So they're the ones that are likely to be what we're seeing here. So I think she is a depersonalization person. And what I mean by dissociation is that, especially in kids in their childhood, when they're undergoing, if they undergo some kind of severe trauma or even light trauma in many cases. They detach from the present moment. And grown-ups who have been doing this for a long time, this muscle tends to strengthen over time. And they find that it's easier to do things way outside of their normal comfort zone because they can dissociate from the action. And I think there may be some stuff we're about to see that's going to bring this up again. And I apologize for the long explanation. I'll pass it to you, Greg.
Hey panelists, quick intro. I want you to meet Jess, our sponsorship specialist. Hey Jess.
Hi Mark.
Jess, thanks for letting me do this. I just Googled your full name. Now, is your address Los Angeles?
Yes.
And your phone number 214-428?
Where are you finding all this information?
Yeah, see, that's the scary part. Your personal info, address, phone, email is out there for anyone to find. All I did was just Google search, and it's not a hack. It's data brokers, companies that collect and sell your information to marketeers, scammers, even identity thieves. And yes, it's totally legal and totally creepy. They're supposed to remove your info if you ask, but they bury that in legalese and red tape, hoping you just give up. Or you can do what we do, which is use Aura, today's sponsor. Aura scans the web for data brokers, sharing your info, and automatically sends opt-out requests on your behalf. Just give it a few days and your personal data starts vanishing from those sketchy sites. But Aura doesn't stop there. It monitors the dark web 24/7 and alerts you fast if your info shows up. It'll warn you if someone tries to open a bank account or credit line in your name. And if something does go wrong, you're covered with up to $5 million in identity theft insurance and a US-based fraud team ready to step in. Plus, Aura includes a world-class VPN so you can browse and shop safely from anywhere. It's privacy, protection, and peace of mind all in one. So go to aura.com/TBP and get 14 days free. That's enough time for Aura to start scrubbing your personal info from the internet. Thanks again, Jess. And now back to the show.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Her down left eye movement, I'm going to give you what this is in you. Her down left eye movement is her navigating the minefield. She's walking through an internal conversation about what she's thinking. Try this at home. You try to calculate 15% of 980 without rounding, and you're going to find first you'll try to look up to your left a little. That won't work, and you'll drop down into your lower left as you're rifling through trying to figure out an actual internal conversation with self. You see her doing that a lot in this video. When I ask a question, I don't expect a person to do that because they're figuring out how to answer is what it is. She also is starting to tell a narrative. There's structure to her story. She's starting off, and Mark, I'm going to not steal much here because I know you're going to have a lot around storytelling. And she's starting to build story structure she can later use. If I were interrogating her, he missed one opportunity here that I would say. She said words that leave a glaring hole in her story for me. And she says,
He was watching Tiger Woods.
And then was going to take a nap.
And then was going to take a nap.
There's a weird tense change for you. So, okay, maybe that's the way she's remembering it. I would have said, exactly what was he watching Tiger Woods? Because I can verify that on TV. I can tell what was going on at that point. But and then he was going to take a nap. I would venture to say somewhere in there, there's a problem. It's the only time I hear her use that word pattern in her entire story. And Joe Navarre and Jack Schaefer call that verbal bridging. I call it time hiding, whatever you want to call it. I'd say they coined the phrase verbal bridging. There's that. She does that lilt at almost every opportunity that she tells you something. That lilting, my house was ransacked.
My house had been ransacked.
The other thing is when people make their living using their face, when people smile a lot, it leaves residuals. When people have a train wreck of stuff on their face, it's because they do a lot of train wreck stuff with their face. I can just about guarantee you there's some intensity in this person we're not seeing in this interview. And all the etching or residuals that you're seeing are all those years of her scrunching up her head and doing whatever she does. I would venture to say an argument with her is a very hot argument just by looking at her face. Look at mine. You can tell I've been kind of a jerk to people in my life. So if I've got this and she's got that, that's a pretty bad indicator. And then finally, you'll find she does a great
great grief. She engages a chin in her forehead, but we don't know why. Guys, there's no indicator of deception. There's no single indicator. It just makes us know what to ask next. But she tongue juts in the middle of that. And this is not a grooming move. This is a full-on tongue jut. I mean, it sticks out. And then last one I'll leave you with, and you watch from here on, 21 first-person pronouns. She's talking about her husband. He gets about 11. That's what I got. Scott, what do you got?
All right, let's talk about some of the things she said and the way she looked when she said them. When she's talking about the last words her husband told her.
The last thing that my husband said to me was, I love you.
She doesn't show any emotion in that. When I tell you guys, when I put my dog Albert, when we had to go put him to sleep, I know what time it was. I know exactly what my face was doing. And even though a little time has passed since then, when I'm not in this situation, I'm explaining to someone, my face isn't going to look like it does now. It's going to be a little bit more emotional than this. Her face, she's talking about her husband, the guy that she was supposed to be the soulmate with. She shows no emotion at all in the direction of sadness or grief. She just said the last thing he said was I love me. He loves me. Also in this, the women watching this, they're going to say, why does this hit me wrong? Why is this odd? And they're going to feel it in their gut, because what their brain has seen is this. They've seen an edit in that. The last thing he said was that he loved me and she keeps talking wasn't part of that original question, because if you'll listen to that, you'll hear him talking in the background. They've cut his mic, so you don't hear him talking. They've cut to her, and you can hear his voice, the room sound of his voice bouncing off back there, and he's asking her something else. So if there's a woman watching this, you go, why does that feel so weird? That you didn't know what to look for or listen for. That's why it feels weird to you.
The last thing that my husband said to me was, I love you.
I love those ears, Scott. I didn't hear that.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
Well, then she talks about this. She says, I came in approximately 4:30, 5 o'clock.
I walked into my house at approximately 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's great, because that gives her that 30-minute window to shoot this guy and clean everything up and do everything she needs to do to get ready to present this to the the dispatcher, to the 911 operator. So you've got that amount of time, and she makes sure to say it was, I don't know what time it was. In other words, it was approximately 4:30, 5 o'clock. And I was in the gym.
I had the music blaring and was working out.
And that fits the alibi that goes with why she didn't hear the gunshots as well. In the full 911 call, she mentioned she was in the gym 8 times. 8 times she says, I was in the gym and I had just come back from the gym. I'd been in the gym. I just came in from the 8 times. That's saying, if you're not talking about the person needing help and in that first things out of your mouth, something's up. But that 30-minute window gives her enough time to get rid of to wipe things clean, to clean things up, clean herself up, and then get psyched up and make that phone call. So that's what I got. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, lovely. So lots of good things set up here. Absolutely concur with everything I've heard there. Listen out for those inflections, lots of upward inflections in this one, which often sound kind of like requests for approval, or that it might be a question, more of a statement later on. We will hear some downward inflections, and they'll be around things that we actually know to be factual. So let's point those out as we go along. Good point, Greg. You know, why was Tiger Woods on the television? Well, that was the Phoenix Open in Arizona, apparently. And that's why Tiger Woods is on the TV. So does she mention Tiger Woods? Because she puts a big stress on Tiger Woods.
He was watching Tiger Woods.
Does she mention that because she's kind of a big golf fan and it really sticks in her mind? Or is it that Tiger Woods is not only an icon of golf, but an icon of infidelity? He is representative of both those things. And in fact, for many people, more of an icon of infidelity. And so now I've never come across this story before, but the moment I heard that stress on Tiger Woods was the moment where I thought, we're going to hear about somebody being some infidelity a bit later on. I would gamble. So watch out for that.
The last thing that my husband said to me was, I love you.
Upward inflection. I think this is a resume statement. This is, look, he told me he loves me, so, you know, we're in love, so why would I kill him? So it's already set up there. I kind of killed him because the last thing he said was, I love you, and therefore, you know, we must love each other back. Absolutely request for approval all the way through. Now responds with concern and confusion at the end, and absolutely we've got grief muscles here and here, and it's really good. Like it's really good. I think when Piers Morgan says this is a really good liar, yeah, this is really good stuff. She does it really, really well. And if it weren't for all these other things around it and what we're going to hear about, that signal alone would probably get most people, and they would feel immediate empathy around that grief. So as a first out of the gate here, good performance, but with quite a few interesting tells in there about what we're going to see later on. That's what I got for you.
Excellent.
Tell me in your words what happened.
Larry was home. He was watching Tiger Woods and then was going to take a nap and watch the Super Bowl later on that evening. I checked on him to see if he needed anything. He said that we would order a pizza later, and I went back out to the gym. The last thing that my husband said to me was, I love you. I had the music blaring and was working out. I walked into my house at approximately 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I found my husband in a pool of blood. I've never seen so much blood in my life. And I could see from where I was standing that my house had been ransacked. I didn't know if Larry had fallen down the stairs, if Larry had been shot, if Larry had been stabbed. I had no idea what had happened. But I frantically tried to take his pulse and then ran outside to call 911. I thought my husband was still alive because his eyes were open. And I told him to hold on. My world has not been the same since. And nothing has made much sense for me since that time.
But the police seem pretty certain that you were the killer, that you cold-bloodedly took a gun and pumped 5 bullets into your husband until he was dead. That's what they believe.
Yeah.
The police found the ransacking extremely suspect.
That's what they said.
They're putting it all together, and it's an incredibly compelling case. If you were watching LA Law or something on TV, you would be convicting this person, almost certainly. Most people think you're guilty. Why should we believe that you're not?
Because of the things that weren't looked at, I was convicted on absolutely no physical evidence whatsoever. They found fingerprints and footprints that were never matched to anybody that belonged to strangers. There was no DNA, no evidence on that firearm that resembled me at all.
All right, I'm going to go first on this one. So when he says, why should we believe you? The answer is because I'm not a murderer. I wouldn't do something like that. I'm not that kind of person. That's not me. I don't do that. That's the answer you give, not a long drawn out thing about evidence and these other things that go down to the analytical side of it. You say, I'm not that kind of person. That's why I wouldn't do that. That's where you go with that. We see a picture of the bathroom, and we see pill bottles in the pill chest or whatever's been gone through behind the mirror. And the pill bottles are laying everywhere. That's not what happens. When somebody breaks into your house to steal stuff, what they do is they go in the bedroom and they'll get a pillowcase and they'll get a sheet or the top blanket off the bed. And that's what they throw everything on, and they wrap it up and they leave with that like Santa Claus. So those pills wouldn't be laying on the floor. They're not pulling them out, looking at them. Oh, this isn't what I need. This isn't what I need. They go through and they just pull it all into a pillowcase and they leave with that. That's why they found that suspect. That's what was wrong with that. Odd wording in this when she starts talking about the DNA.
There was no DNA, no evidence on that firearm that resembled me at all.
And I know we all talked about this earlier, and we all thought this was funny, which is there was no DNA, there was no evidence on that firearm. She never says gun. She says firearm. She's separating herself from the gun. Now, who calls it a firearm? Who talks like that? And then she says,
No evidence on that firearm that resembled me at all.
that's weird. That's weird. Again, she's separating herself. That resembled me at all. Nothing on that gun that resembled me. I've never heard that before in my life. That is weird. That's weird to hear. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so I think you're starting now to see a pattern. I think she started off telling a story, and her pattern now is going to be an attorney. She is suddenly going to be, excuse my English, and you can bleep this a little bit if you want. In the Army, we would call that a house lawyer. And she's going to give everybody advice. She's going to know how this works. She'll shift gears and go into jargon. She'll speak legalese, something that's not real, but she feels like sounds real. It's like when people use the wrong pronouns because they're trying to be pretentious, and they go him and I or he and I at the inappropriate times. And you start to see that shift. She's trying to appear to be more presentable. And she's clearly aware that she may or may not be presentable at this point. He also, we don't have it in this video, but Piers Morgan made her cry because he said, your mother thinks you killed him. There's a pretty good indicator. Usually when your mother says, I think she might have done it. You see, she's starting to distance from anything that has expertise or anything else.
That's what they said. Things that weren't looked at, no physical evidence whatsoever.
And I think she's creating a campaign here by saying I agree with you, average people don't call guns firearms. Firearms are things cops call them, or murder weapons, or those kinds of things. And she's picking up on those words because she's trying to have credibility. When a person overextends himself into a new space, and maybe she does this all the time, it might be in her personality, but when a person overextends themselves into new language, Scott, you and I both know when people use medical jargon or legal jargon, what's that a red flag of? Psychopaths, they always want to blend in and fit, and they try to fit right in that business. So I'm not going to go any further than that. She's trying to create reasonable doubt in the legal term, like she's back at trial. That's what I think she's doing. So from that, Chase, what do you got?
So there's one thing that every interrogator learns when you first start out, maybe your first day of class. A failure to make a strong positive denial is a gigantic red flag. I didn't do it. I don't care. I don't have to prove myself. I didn't do it. There's no possible way I would ever do something like this. That's a strong, confident, positive denial that I didn't do this thing. And we see a chin thrust here, a nice big one, when he's starting to bring the topic up.
Most people think you're guilty. Why should we believe that you're not?
Because of the things that weren't looked at.
And this is indicative of disdain or sometimes contempt. In the primate world, we are primates. All primates will expose the neck to show that I'm not threatening. But this is also to challenge the other person out of anger. We see drunk idiots in a bar who are about to get into a fight. Their chin goes up, their arms come out. We see all these vital organs getting exposed to show I'm not afraid of you. So we see that here. But there's two things here I want you to really pay attention to for the rest of this entire YouTube video. I want you to watch if somebody killed someone that's close to you, God forbid, you'd be really, really concerned about the perpetrator. You would talk about them. You would mention them. When you wouldn't say, I don't know how the gun got in the car, you'd say, I don't know who put the gun in the car. The conversation would be about the perpetrator and not an action. And we'll uncover some more of this in just a minute. Mark?
Yeah, so in our last video, what you'd have seen is plenty of chin down to Chase's point. And so in this one, and in the last one as well, as I think Scott was saying, lots of mentions of herself. Okay, in this video where Piers comes in and says,
why should we believe that you're not?
He starts to put into question herself. And at that point, once herself is questioned, up comes the chin. And the response to that confrontation is, I would say, arrogance, which is to say, you cannot question me. I am untouchable. Here are my kill points. Yeah, you're not going to get me.
And it's an extreme difference. I want you to go back and look at where the head is placed for the predominance of that first video, and look where the head is placed on that second video, and realize that the question is, why should we believe you? And see what effect that has. Now, I even checked the camera angle to make sure the camera, as it came from Piers, didn't dip down, that it might make it look like that. The camera, the person on the camera is getting exactly the same height, not gone underneath. So it's definitely a big display to that questioning that person around believability. I'll leave it at that.
I think the two of you are on to something, the bar fight, and that's who you're seeing. That's a scrapper throwing their chin up, prepared for what you're at. That's the reason the chin goes up with her. I have that in my notes.
Yeah. Well, when arrogance happens, the person believes that they're untouchable. Yeah. It's basically to say, when you do it in close proximity, within striking distance, you're saying, I don't think you're going to attack. I don't think you've got it. I don't think you have anything. Yeah. And that's what's beautifully arrogant about it, especially when you've got somebody with power in front of you. And Piers has some power. She doesn't think he has any power.
The police found the ransacking extremely suspect.
That's what they said.
They're putting it all together, and it's an incredibly compelling case. If you were watching LA Law or something on TV, you would be convicting this person, almost certainly. Most people think you're guilty. Why should we believe that you're not?
Because of the things that weren't looked at. I was convicted on absolutely no physical evidence whatsoever. They found fingerprints and footprints that were never matched to anybody that belonged to strangers. There was no DNA, no evidence on that firearm that resembled me at all.
Were you always completely faithful to Larry?
Yes.
There was a suggestion.
Yes.
That you're aware of, that there was a man at AA called David. You made 160 phone calls between each other over
after Larry's death, right after Larry's death.
A few weeks, yeah. I mean, that's a lot of phone calls with another man. Was he somebody you had seen prior to Larry's death?
He was somebody that I met in AA. He was a very nice man. There was never anything romantic or sexual between us. And right after Larry was killed, he really stepped up and held me up. I called him so much that it actually drove him crazy, and he had to pull away from me as a friend and not be able to really help me as much as he wanted to in the beginning.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Notice there are two very different yeses happening there. There's a yes that starts very soft at the start and has kind of three tonal movements in it. It kind of goes, yeah.
Yes.
And then there's another yes afterwards that goes, yes.
Yes.
Which just has one up and down tonal movement to it. So they're just one word, yes, but I would like you to go back and think, is one of those yeses true and one of those yeses false? I would suggest the yes that just goes, yes.
Yes.
That is a true answer. Okay. I would suggest the yes that goes, yeah.
Yes.
Like that. Not telling the truth there. So we can look out for this along our journey through this. Romantic, sexual, when that's talked about, you see her eyes narrow, and I would say you start to see anger on the face, and Piers becomes the target of anger around the idea of romantic and sexual. I think that's why, as we were all noting before we came back, you start to see the blink rate of Piers go up quite significantly. And I would suggest we start to see him get a little bit worried. His instinct knows he's just got targeted by her. He has said something which is triggering her. And I would reckon he's starting to feel it at an unconscious, maybe even conscious level.
I called him so much that it actually drove him crazy, and he had to pull away from me as a friend and not be able to really help me as much as he wanted to in the beginning.
So that's kind of interesting, because what she's basically saying is somebody broke up a relationship with me because I called them so much. Think about in your life, you know, what would, if somebody called you so much that you had to break off your friendship with them, what might it say to you about the personality of that person, the kind of calls that you were getting? Like, what would have to happen for you in a myriad of calls for you to go, this is it. I can't do this anymore. I can't be a friend anymore. Because again, this is starting to give us an idea of the character, the personality that we have here. She says he was not able to help me as much as he wanted to in the beginning. So what she's saying is she's saying he didn't come up to his own muster. And by that, she's gaining superiority over him. Throughout this whole piece, what she manages to do is say that this person was less than they should be. And so in my view, I would start to suggest, with all the evidence that we've had so far, that we're seeing the personality of a malignant narcissist at this point, which is usually pretty dangerous. So again, go through all that we've said before, start to look at those things where instead of thinking about a victim, they're talking about themselves, they're talking about the amount that they've suffered. They'll usually be going up against authority. Nothing of authority counts anymore. It doesn't have any validity, easily angered. So I'll leave it there. Scott, what have you got?
All right. When she first starts talking, when he asks her if she's seen anybody else, when she says yes, everything she talks about from that point starts getting quieter. She doesn't say, were you always faithful to Larry? She doesn't say, yes. She says, yes.
Yes.
It's very quiet. There's no affirmative in there. I mean, other than the word yes. And then she's head nodding. She says, yes, I never did anything like that, blah, blah, blah. It still keeps getting quieter as she goes along. She never says this guy's name. I know his last name's Nolan. I can't remember what his first name is. And she says,
he was somebody that I met in AA. He was a very nice man.
She always refers to him as he or him. She never says his name. She just talks about how wonderful this guy was, right? And then she's got too many of those affirmative head nods after she answers. She's again, like, goes back to what Chase was saying. Eyebrows are up and she's like, you get it, or you agree with me. When she says there was nothing, or there wasn't anything romantic or sexual between us, some people are going to think that head nod, again, leading back to that, means she's saying yes as she's saying no. While she's saying no, that's not what it is. Again, it's that affirmative connection where she's making that hard eye contact. Those eyebrows are up and she's going, there was nothing. You understand what I'm saying? You agree with me? And again, he's not agreeing with her. So that's why she's coming on so hard with that, I believe. All right. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, so one of the things, I'll make this short, you guys are talking about here is called psychological distancing. So we're distancing from the person, and typically suspects in a crime who've committed a crime or are being deceptive are far less likely to use the name of the person. And they're also less likely to say what the crime is. Instead of murder, they might say hurt. Instead of steal, they might say take. Instead of stab, they might say hurt. So we soften the severity of things. And in some cases, which you might be familiar with, instead of Monica Lewinsky, you might hear that woman. Instead of sex, you might hear sexual relations. So we tend to do this when the statement is deceptive. And that's something that we just need to keep an eye out for. And like Greg said at the beginning, we're looking for clusters of these. And we're looking for changes from normal behavior. And while there's no behavior for deception, change can very much show us deception. And clusters of these things can show us deception. And I think that we're starting to see that a misunderstanding of social behavior is par for the course for this person to begin with. It's a misunderstood or a failure to understand normal social behavior. It's just a little bit dialed in the wrong direction with a lot of this stuff, just in how she responds, how she speaks, how she does fake confusion. That's all I got.
Yeah, so what I've got is, if you go watch her, I think you're dead on, Mark. She's got narcissism traits here. You can't miss it. She aggrandizes. Everything's larger than life. Go listen to how she describes her house and everything else. It was the Taj Mahal. Anything she says is over the top. All narcissists, because they're trying to fill in for that insecurity, are going to overdo everything. Interesting for her here. I had the same yeses. Great. She gave us a baseline and then failed it right afterward. And Chase, you're hitting on the baseline. Nothing we do is magical. What we're doing is looking and saying, if you always scratch your nose on the right and you scratch your nose on the left, why? That's what we do, is why. We're in the why business. She does something very interesting. In this place, she always pays attention, but the minute Piers says 160, he's using a great interrogator trick. He's slowly releasing information to see her response. And what does she do? She changes her body language.
You made 160 phone calls.
She tilts in. She has that fake concern, and she's trying to fish out, is the 160 calls something new they've found, or is this the old stuff? And the minute he says, oh, after his death, she's like, yeah. And her face lights up and her brow rises. And she goes, yeah. The other interesting piece she does here for me is she doesn't do this anywhere else in the video. There are 2 or 3 places. She doesn't illustrate at all. Watch her hands are down. Mark, I was thinking either she's in the grotesque plane, to use your methodology, or she's handcuffed. She's not handcuffed. So her hands are here. Women typically don't use their hands down here around their waist when they're talking to you. They typically are moving their hands more. Now, remember, it's a bell curve. But she, as a person, anytime she's told us a story, has not used her hands. And then suddenly he pulled away from me. That means something in this story, and we probably want to poke and find out what. I think if we were to dig in, if I were interrogating her, I'd say what happened. And the last one I'll give you, and this is a piece of that, just body language, it may or may not mean anything, but the minute she realizes that it's 160, her lip sinks back in. That, we all know, means she needs reassurance. And so that's a great indicator. She's like, oh, I think I'm in dangerous ground here. This is a good one. This is probably going to be one of the more telling ones we find, aside from the 911 calls. That's what I got.
All right.
Were you always completely faithful to Larry?
Yes.
There was a suggestion
Yes.
that you're aware of, that there was a man at AA called David. You made 160 phone calls between each other over
After Larry's death, right after Larry's death.
a few
yes.
weeks. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of phone calls with another man. Was he somebody you had seen prior to Larry's death?
He was somebody that I met in AA. He was a very nice man. There was never anything romantic or sexual between us. And right after Larry was killed, he really stepped up and held me up. I called him so much that it actually drove him crazy, and he had to pull away from me as a friend and not be able to really help me as much as he wanted to in the beginning.
There you have it, Rebecca Fenton, and in all her glory in that situation. So if you like what we're doing, please go ahead and subscribe. All right, we good?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's
Thanks.
one more than a can.
Deal.
I'll see you guys next time.
I know.
So what do you got?